Welcome to the Leader's Edge podcast. I'm your host, Chris Kolenda, retired Army Colonel, combat leader, author, and speaker. I work with leaders who want to create unshakable business endurance. So tune in as I translate powerful leadership lessons from the battlefield and apply them to your business. From Gettysburg and Normandy to your next biggest business challenges and opportunities, this podcast helps you gain the clarity, confidence, and competitive edge to steer with purpose and win decisively. Ready to sharpen your leadership? Let's dive in. Welcome to episode 3 of the Antietam Gettysburg podcast. And today what I want to discuss, or at least start off with, is accountability. When it comes to creating an unstoppable workforce, relentless improvement is vital. And accountability is all about shaping and improving future performance. It's not about punishment. It's about shaping and improving future performance. Now, take a look at this pyramid. 80% of leaders, according to Forbes, report difficulties holding their employees accountable. The conversations are awkward, so they just don't do it at all. Some people feel like they come down way too hard and create resentment and defensiveness. Others are just simply too light. And so the effect of this is that you're not getting continuous improvement. You're not getting relentless improvement that is going to drive higher performance and innovation. Only 20% are in the light green, where they are comfortable, where they enjoy productive accountability. So the magic is in what is happening at the white line that's making a difference. There is something that happens at that white line that either keeps you in the 80%, where accountability is awkward and difficult and doesn't quite work, or boost you into the 20% where your accountability is leading to elite performance. So that's going to be the focus of today. So let's situate in the big picture on the practical wisdom framework. Where we are focused today with this particular example is on relentless improvement. It's part of empowering oversight, which allows you to move from micromanagement to igniting ingenuity. Now, it might seem a little bit contradictory for accountability to ignite ingenuity, but that's exactly what it does when you use accountability to focus on improving future performance rather than dwelling on past mistakes. A wonderful example of this is the Iron Brigade in the Civil War. So the Iron Brigade actually fought at both Antietam and Gettysburg. They were one of the most celebrated, in fact, maybe the most ferocious fighting unit on either side of the Civil War. During the Battle of Antietam, the Iron Brigade led the attack into the cornfield, the main attack, or the first attack against Lee, and suffered tremendous casualties against an outnumbered force, put up a tremendous fight, and had just about broken the Confederate lines, and had the Union, the Army of the Potomac, and its General McClellan been a bit more aggressive early on in the Battle of Antietam, they might very well have broken the Confederate defenses. At the Battle of Gettysburg, the Iron Brigade was the first infantry on the field. So when you recall from episodes 1 and 2, you had Buford with his cavalry had set up forward of Cemetery Ridge and had engaged the Confederates and delayed them, giving time for the Iron Brigade, which is the first on the field, to arrive. And the Iron Brigade fought a force 3 times their size to a standstill, once again suffering tremendous casualties. And the Iron Brigade continued to fight throughout the rest of Gettysburg. And had it not been for the Iron Brigade and their discipline and their accountability, you might not have had a day 2 or day 3 at Gettysburg. So their role was absolutely vital. And it was accountability, this thirst for relentless improvement, that made such a huge difference with the Iron Brigade. So let's go back to the drawing and find out what they did to cross the white line. So back to the pyramid, and again, we were focused on this white line. What do the best leaders do to arouse elite performance? And a question is, or at least an answer to that question, how do you arouse elite performance? The people in the red area, the leaders in the red area, tend to focus on carrots and sticks, whereas the ones in the green area create an environment where employees are disciplining themselves. So let's think about the contrast for just a minute. When you use carrots and sticks, you are essentially focused on past behavior. A stick is designed to punish or penalize past bad behavior, poor performance, whereas a carrot is used to reward past performance. And you only have so many carrots and sticks in the deck. Let's go to this chart. This is one of my favorites. You only have so many carrots and sticks in the deck. And so if you're dealing with horrible performance, that's when you're using the swift sticks. And when you're dealing with heroic performance, that's where you're using compelling carrots. You only have so many of those. There's only so many times you can apply the stick, you can apply the hammer. Because if you do it too often, you create this toxic work environment. So you have to be very selective in dealing with the truly egregious behavior with that tool. Likewise, on the other side, you have to be very selective on how you apply these compelling carrots. Maybe they're monetary bonuses, maybe they're awards. Because what you don't want to do is cheapen the award so that anybody who's just basically doing their job is getting these massive awards. You're going to cheapen them, and the people who are actually doing a heroic performance are going to get cynical, and they're not going to do it anymore. So you've got to be very careful about either end of the spectrum. Now, you get about 2.5% of your behavior in the horrible side and about 2.5% of your behavior on the heroic side. That means about 95% of behavior is happening between these two lines. In the performance that is maybe just a little bit subpar, or can be a little bit better, and behavior that is too standard, where people are doing the right things, and you want to encourage that. That's what you want people to do, to go at or slightly above the standard. It may not be heroic. That's okay. You can't always be heroic, but you certainly want people to be achieving the standards or even exceeding them and doing so on their own volition. So the question is, all right, how do we do this? And what this chart shows is that 95% of our accountability opportunities are opportunities to encourage relentless improvement. Most leaders, at the 80% of the leaders, just simply leave it on the table because all they do is focus on carrots and sticks. It's lazy accountability. The ones that are crossing this white line right here are the ones that are dealing with the 95% of the behaviors. And here's what they're doing. So here's a couple myths that are keeping people trapped in the red area, the 80% in the red area. The first myth is that criticism is creating resistance. And so when I criticize subpar behavior, I'm getting all of this resistance from my employees. I'm getting the defensiveness. And so the juice just simply isn't worth the squeeze. You might as well kind of let it slide, and because you're just creating more antibodies. So deal with the horrible performance. Everybody knows you got to deal with that. Let the other stuff slide. Now, the problem, of course, with that approach is you're allowing subpar behavior to become habitual. So if you're here and you see the subpar behavior, you can go in one of two directions. If you let it go, then that becomes drift. And you eventually drift into something that becomes a habit. And once it becomes a habit, it becomes exceptionally hard to break. Because if this is time, if this line represents time, the longer you let it go, the harder it is to correct the behavior. So what you want to do is you want to put people on this green line to success, to improving future performance. And at the point where you identify the subpar behavior is the closest your employee is ever going to be to the green line. Right here is the closest they'll ever be to the green line. And the lift is actually quite small with the right approach. This lift, the longer it goes, time compounds all issues. It compounds your money, and it also compounds habits and pain. And so the longer you let things drift and become bad habits, the more painful the correction is going to be. So that's the first myth. The second myth on the other side, on the light green side, is that, well, people are just doing their jobs. And so you shouldn't reward people for doing their jobs. And so that's why so many leaders at the bottom, at the 80% that are struggling with accountability, are having challenges, is because they don't recognize the difference between award and appreciation. And so the truth is that you control everything in the middle. And you control how that light green line slides. And ultimately what we want is the light green line sliding to the left, to where ideally 90% of your behavior of your employees is actually in the light green. It's standard plus. And a very small amount is subpar. So how do we get there from here? The key is, the key is to address the two areas in the middle. That's what the heroes at the white line that get him up into the 20%, that's what they're doing so right. And that's what the Iron Brigade was able to do consistently with their soldiers. So when you're addressing subpar performance, the key here is to use supportive criticism. And supportive criticism starts with the belief that the individual can do the job and do it well. And that you, as the leader, are going to support them in doing it better next time. So you're not beating them up about what happened last time. You're saying, here's how I'm going to support you doing it better next time. So it's a three-step process. Step one is you identify what went wrong. Identify the behavior that was simply subpar. So I saw this, I heard this report that you were struggling with this particular task. I see that you're struggling with this particular task. Number two, here's the impact. The impact is it's costing us more time to manufacture this particular part. The impact is that as you are struggling with customer complaints, that they are leaving frustrated rather than as ambassadors to our organization. And step three is, here is how you are going to support your employee in getting better. So here's what I'm going to do to support you. We're going to give you more training on this part of the manufacturing process so that this becomes seamless for you. We're going to do some more training and rehearsals on dealing with customer complaints so that you feel more comfortable when you are engaging a customer who's got an issue, and that they leave as ambassadors and not frustrated. So that's your supportive criticism. You're demonstrating faith in the employee, and you're showing that you got their backs by helping them do it right next time. The problem with constructive criticism, or just plain criticism, is that just because somebody knows what they did wrong doesn't necessarily mean they know what to do right. Now, your most powerful shaping behavior tool is actually next door in the light green. And this is where you use actionable appreciation. So you don't want to do the sunshine appreciation of, gee, that was a great job. Oh, you're awesome. People feel good, but they don't know what behavior to repeat. So you want actionable appreciation. And the principles are the same as in supportive criticism. So you identify the behavior that was awesome. I saw exactly how you handled that customer complaint. You made sure that they knew that they were heard. You addressed their complaint quickly, and they left happy as ambassadors for our organization. It's exactly the behavior I want you to repeat. Step 2 is you're talking about the impact, just as I described. They left happy. They left as ambassadors. They're going to keep coming back, and they're encourage their friends to do so. And then 3 is your simple appreciation. I appreciate what you did. I acknowledge it. I appreciate it. I want you to repeat that behavior. So now they know exactly what behavior to repeat because you recognized it, you acknowledged it, you appreciated it, and so does everybody else around them. So that's how you do actionable appreciation. And you have an unlimited number of tools at your disposal to do both supportive criticism and actionable appreciation because it's a conversation. And it's always a supportive conversation, so it doesn't create the defensiveness and the anxiety that coming up to somebody and saying, may I give you some constructive criticism? You know exactly what happens then. The shields go up. So use this approach. Focus on improving the behavior next time, and you're going to find it removes all of the awkwardness, and you personally are going to be the white line hero, where you cross from the 80% that are being frustrated with accountability into the 20% who have productive accountability and the relentless improvement that you find in elite organizations. Purposeful presence happens when leaders vote with their engagement because their presence indicates what's really important, and they are ruthless at making sure that they are at the decisive place, doing the right things at the right time. And the leaders during Antietam and Gettysburg will demonstrate both ends of this particular spectrum. And this is really important today because of this chart. When you look at this chart, there's some interesting data points. The first data point is that 53% of managers report burnout. And only 38% of employees say that they want to be managers. So we've got leaders, managers working harder and harder and harder, and we have got employees saying, I don't want to be like you. And this is very damaging, of course, for the future of organizations. And so when you look at this particular chart, on the north-south axis is self-care. And at the bottom is either self-serving, so somebody is just purely serving themselves or self-absorbed, or they are selfless in the sense that they don't really care about themselves. They have no boundaries. And then the top of that self-care is self-stewardship, where you've got the boundaries, you obey the oxygen mask principle, you take care of yourself so that you can be in the best possible position to take care of others. Now, on the east-west axis, you have support. So bad is either doing their jobs for them or simply neglecting them. And then on the far right is empowering excellence. And so this sets up this challenge that you've got a lot of leaders getting trapped in either the problems of, I would call it, the positional privilege, is bad. Nobody respects somebody who says, look at the goal, do as you're told, do as I say, not as I do. The rank has its privileges and all of this other sort of nonsense. Now, the other thing that this indicates to me, especially when you see so many leaders burning out and very few people wanting to be leaders, or fewer and fewer wanting to be leaders, is you're seeing a dark side of servant leadership. Because what happens in servant leadership is it's very easy to get abused by both sides. So you can get abused from the top when your boss says, well, I need you to stay until 10 o'clock tonight again, even though it's your anniversary. I mean, you are a servant leader to this organization, aren't you? I mean, if the company wanted you to have a family, we would have given you one at in processing during your onboarding. So you get that kind of abuse from certain managers that will weaponize servant leadership. You also get it from employees who delegate their work up to you. So this could be by saying, I don't know how to do it. I don't have time. I'm struggling with this. And so often the servant leader will say, well, I am a servant to this organization. I am serving my employee. Therefore, I'm going to take this off of your plate and I'm going to put it onto mine, to put it into my rucksack. And you keep doing this and doing this and doing this. The employees get pretty smart and they say, I'm just going to delegate my job up to them. I mean, after all, my leader is my servant. And so I'm going to allow them to serve me by doing my job. And that means I don't have to. And what it means for the servant leader is your rucksack is just heavier, heavier, and heavier, and heavier. And until finally you can't move anymore and you're burning out. So this is one of the ways that makes sense of these seemingly contradictory numbers of high levels of burnout and very low levels of employees wanting to be just like us. And so, once again, the key is the white line. What are the heroes who cross the white line doing to get to the green zone? So many leaders trapped in red zone. What are the ones doing right that get moving into the green zone? And that's exactly what we're going to discuss today during this part of the podcast. And just to go back to our practical wisdom framework, we are in courageous insight. So this particular part of the episode is on courageous insight and here at powerful presence. Powerful presence, part of courageous insight, allows you to move from cautious hesitation to decisive action. Now, when it comes to cautious hesitation, the poster child of cautious hesitation is General George B. McClellan, who was the commander of the Army of the Potomac during the Battle of Antietam. Lincoln always complained that McClellan had a case of the slows. And McClellan had a case of the slows for a couple of reasons. First of all, he was deathly afraid of failure. In fact, McClellan, all the way from the days at West Point, all the way up to the Civil War, everything came easy for this guy. He was number 2 at his class at West Point. He was very successful in the Army as a junior officer. He became a highly successful business person, and everything just came easy. Now he's the leader of the Army of the Potomac, and he's overmatched. And he has this very intense fear of failure, which causes him to do a couple things. First of all, he is so methodical that he won't make a move, and he's demonstrated this time and time again, won't make a move until he feels like everything is exactly set just right. And of course, you could always increase the number of details and the standards for just right, which means he's missing lots of opportunities. And then second, he tends to inflate the size of the challenge that's in front of him. Because if he loses, then, well, it was because I was facing this overwhelming enemy force. So he would tend to count the enemy to be 2 to 3 times larger than they actually were. And both these problems came to haunt him at Antietam. So a few days before the Battle of Antietam, McClellan actually captured a copy of Lee's battle plan. So he's got Lee's stuff in his hands. Yeah, big sad face if you're Lee, big thumbs up if you are McClellan. So he's got his copy, he's got Lee's plan, and he sees Lee has got his forces divided. And McClellan's fact says, I've got his plan, I know how to destroy him. And so the key now at this point was to try to defeat Lee's forces in detail. So McClellan starts moving. Lee recognizes that McClellan's moving, so he's trying to consolidate forces. But McClellan's just simply not moving fast enough where he can catch any of them isolated. And so he finally lumbers up to a place called Antietam Creek, and Lee's got his forces consolidated on the other side of that creek. So McClellan missed an opportunity to destroy piecemeal Lee. So now Lee's got most of his force on the 16th of September in one spot. At the same time, McClellan is reporting to Lincoln that Lee's army is over 100,000 strong. Now, Lee's army was barely 50,000. And that was with all of the ones that had been detached and were in different locations. So McClellan has got 70 to 80,000 soldiers. He has a substantial advantage in numbers over Lee. And at the beginning of the Battle of Antietam, Lee doesn't even have that 55,000. He's got maybe 40,000 on the field. And so McClellan is outnumbered him about 2 to 1. But because he's inflated Lee's numbers and he is overly cautious in how he attacks, he never really commits. So he attacks piecemeal in one area, he attacks piecemeal in another area, he attacks piecemeal in the third area. And what Lee's able to do each time is shift forces in ways that deal with each of these individualized attacks. And then, of course, as luck would have it, just as McClellan is gaining an advantage because one of his subordinates finally attacks a couple hours late, is advancing, threatens Lee's withdrawal back into Virginia. The last group of Lee's army shows up and hits that Union force in the flank, and Lee is able to withdraw from a very precarious position. So McClellan had this opportunity on the 17th, 16, 17, 18 September to have ended the Civil War had he been a bit more aggressive in how he moved, had he applied his presence to the places that were decisive, and had he not psyched himself out in terms of Lee's numbers. We lost an opportunity to end the war in 1862, and the war dragged on for another 3 years. Now, the opposite of him was General Winfield Scott Hancock at Gettysburg. And what I love about Hancock is he always knew how to be at the decisive place in time so he could make decisions that brought out the best in people and enabled his forces to be successful. On day one at Gettysburg, one of the Confederate corps had steamrolled over a Union corps that broke and ran back to a place called East Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill, and they were in panic. Hancock comes up. He's not even the corps commander. He's commanding a different corps. So he comes up, he stabilizes the line, he gets everybody calmed down, gets people starting to dig in and reinforcing their positions, and gave them the confidence that they could stand their ground on that high ground. And of course, for the next 2 days of Confederate attacks, this corps that had earlier broken and had also broken at Chancellorsville stood their ground and fought valiantly in restoring their reputation. On day 3 at Gettysburg, as Pickett's charge is getting ready to mount, the Confederates launched this huge artillery barrage at the center of the Union line. And that's exactly where Hancock's corps was, in the center. And what Hancock did was he was riding on horseback, so everybody could see him very calmly, and inspiring his soldiers, saying, "Hey, if I'm up here doing my job, everybody else can do their jobs too." Hancock wound up being wounded during that part of the battle, and his soldiers stood their ground. They withstood Pickett's charge. They held off the Confederates at the high water mark and ultimately forced Lee to retreat. And so in many ways, the Battle of Gettysburg hinged on the personal presence, the purposeful presence of people like Winfield Scott Hancock. You've heard me talk about Reynolds. You've heard me talk about Chamberlain. All of these people led with purposeful presence and inspired their organizations to be successful. So they were the ones that are able to cross the white line. So now let's get back to our white line. What does it take to cross this white line? Well, the first one is you got to be at the edges of the two axes. So self-stewardship is absolutely vital. When you go on an airplane, the flight attendants during the safety briefing will say, if the oxygen mask drops, apply your mask before trying to help others. And the reason why they do that is because you've got to take care of yourself. Because if you don't do that, you're going to run out of oxygen. You're going to start making bad decisions. You're going to start panicking. And not only will you not help the person that you're trying to help when you're in a panic, but you're also probably also going to harm yourself or die. So apply the oxygen mask to yourself first, not so that you can steal all the oxygen. So that's what the self-serving leader does. They apply the oxygen mask first so they can take all the oxygen and heck with the rest of you. The real leader applies the oxygen mask to themselves first so that they can help everybody else. A burned out leader, somebody who's simply exhausted in panic, is not doing any good to anybody. On the east-west axis, what they do is they empower excellence. They expect everybody to do their jobs to the best of their ability. And they are going to delegate. They are going to hold people accountable and not do their jobs for them. So let's take a look at some of these actions. First of all is a clear set of expectations. If you want to cross the white line, you have an expectation that everybody is doing their job. Second is they are going to delegate. Instead of the servant leader approach of taking everybody's rucksack or everybody's rocks into your rucksack, they're going to delegate to their subordinates as much as possible. First of all, because that enables them to focus, the leader to focus on things that are vitally important. And second of all, and more importantly, they want their employees, they want their subordinates to be the heroes. And so the more responsibility that you give them, the more you develop them, the more that you can credit them and praise them for getting great outcomes for your organization. So delegating and setting people up for success through that process is vital. And then third is they act with courage. When you go to a place like Gettysburg, you'll see Winfield Scott Hancock on horseback. And the reason why leaders in the Civil War, just look everybody straight in the eye, the reason why leaders during the Civil War rode on horseback was not because that they were lazy or privileged. It was on the one hand so they could see a little bit better because you're higher up. You see the horses in the background, you're higher up. Second, and more importantly, is so you could be seen by your own people. Because if you are on horseback and everybody else is on foot, who's the enemy shooting at? Yeah, that's right. They're shooting at you, the person on horseback. And the message that Hancock and others are saying is, I'm the most vulnerable person on the battlefield. Everybody's shooting at me. I'm the biggest target. I'm here doing my job. And so can everybody else. So they're modeling the kind of behavior that they expect everybody else to do. So that would be an example of physical courage. They're also showing the emotional courage to be there when things are emotionally difficult, maybe visiting casualties, leveling with people when they're on a very, very difficult mission. They're exemplifying mental courage and the ability, on the one hand, to maintain conviction of what they know is right, and on the other hand, to have the open-mindedness to make shifts and pivot when necessary for the success of the organization. And they also display moral courage, doing the right thing, even despite pressure to do otherwise. And so in all of those 4 ways of courage, these leaders on horseback are setting the example. So the leader on horseback, we get back to our chart, the leader on horseback is the one who crosses this white line because they obey the oxygen mask principle. So let's put on oxygen mask. They have clear expectations that people are going to do their job. They delegate and make their employees the heroes, and they show the courage to be at the vital place at the vital time, setting the right example. One of the many fascinating discussions we have at the Battle of Antietam is about the dark side of servant leadership. And the ideal place to talk about that is a place called the Bloody Lane. Now, about midway through the battle, late in the morning of September 17th, 1862, as the battle in the cornfield was raging and beginning to ebb, a second attack by the Union took place in the Confederate center. And this attack was led by the Irish Brigade, commanded by Brigadier General Marr. Marr attacked as a single brigade against a dug-in Confederate position that existed along a sunken road. And so it was almost like a natural trench line for the Confederates. And so you had 2 brigades of Confederates, one from North Carolina and one from Alabama, that were in the sunken road. And you've got Marr's brigade that is attacking towards him. And Marr was your classic servant leader. He was the kind of leader that everybody looked up to, everybody loved. He created a massive dependency on him and his own personality. So the Irish Brigade and Marr were sort of synonymous. And it worked very well in terms of motivating his people, as people would follow him anywhere. And as Marr attacked, you're not going to leave. What happens next? The Irish Brigade is attacking. They're fighting hard. They're fighting valiantly. And then Marr gets hit. Marr goes down. And suddenly, leaderless, the Irish Brigade virtually ceases to function. They lost about 1,700 casualties in that first engagement. So Marr represents a bit of the dark side of servant leadership, creating this massive dependency on himself that when he went down, there was nobody else who was ready to take charge. Now, the challenge on the Confederate side is that they had the same problem. The Carolina and the Alabama commanders were also both servant leaders, also very charismatic, also created high levels of dependency. So they're fighting hard during this battle. And once the Union commander recognized that Marr's brigade's in trouble, sends more brigades into the line and into the attack. And at one point, the Carolina brigade commander gets shot and he's out of the fight. And for the Alabama commander, a dear friend of his was shot and mortally wounded. And so the Alabama commander essentially evacuated him on his own. And with both of these commanders out of the fight, the Confederate defense just started to crumble. And then an inopportune by somebody who maybe misinterpreted what he was supposed to do or misspoke, essentially said about face double time, which meant everybody got up from their fighting positions essentially in their trench, turned around and started heading to the rear. So the Confederate position essentially broke. The Alabama commander's looking horrified, trying to stop the tide. He can't do it. And eventually General Longstreet, with his staff, and they're up by some cannon on some high ground, is able to finally stop the Confederates from this sort of headlong retreat. This is the result. What you see here are the pictures. The Battle of Antietam was famous for having the first wartime photographs taken immediately in the battle's aftermath. And so this is the sunken road right here, where the Confederates had their position, and the sunken road, it's just at the end of the battle, it's stacked with bodies frankly from both sides, mostly Confederate. And these images were the ones that showed the first horrors of the war to the public. And what it speaks to me, one of the lessons that it speaks to me, is this dark side of servant leadership, where both were commanders on both sides had created such dependencies on themselves that once they were taken out of the fight, their people ceased to function. And no organization can survive like that, because invariably at some point the leader is going to leave. Maybe you get sick, maybe you go on vacation, maybe you move to another job. And if you create that level of dependency around yourself, then your organization is going to flail once you leave. And that's not a mark of good leadership. Actually, what that is a mark of failure. So the dark side of servant leadership comes in a lot of different forms. One is excessive dependency, like what we saw here at the Bloody Lane. Another one is you don't want to place your standards too high because you don't want to overburden people. And so what you wind up doing is constantly playing cleanup, because invariably your people are going to do what they think is right. They're going to meet the standards that you put out for them. But if those standards aren't correct, if they're not high enough, if they're not that right for the organization, and you've got them in your head, then what you're going to start doing is you're going to start tightening everything up, cleaning everything up, lifting the product to the appropriate standard. But that's the job of your employees. And while you're doing that, who's doing your job? A second dark side is a lack of accountability. You don't ever want to tell somebody that they didn't measure up, they didn't meet the standards, that they need to improve. And that is, first of all, unkind. And the subtle message is, you're not good enough. You're not good enough to meet the standards. And even trying to do so with you is not worth my time. I mean, what an awful message to your employees. And what winds up happening when there's no accountability is you wind up just simply taking more and more. You keep putting more and more things into your rucksack because you don't want to offend somebody by saying their work needs to tighten up or they need to do more of it. And so you just simply take on more work yourself. And of course, you're doing everybody else's job. And while you're doing everybody else's job, who's doing yours? There's another part of this, which is even more troubling, which is when there's no accountability, servant leadership gets weaponized from below and weaponized from above. So weaponized from below is when your employees delegate their work to you. So this is upward delegation. Because you have no accountability, you have no expectations that people are going to do their job, they are perfectly willing to offload that to you. I mean, after all, you are my servant, aren't you? You're a servant leader. You're my servant. You should actually be doing my job in addition to yours. And it can be weaponized from above, where the boss, and I've had this happen to me before, the boss is like, you're a servant leader of this organization, aren't you? Well, you don't need to go to your anniversary dinner. You don't need to see your kids play. You need to make that PowerPoint slide. And then finally, a third element of the dark side is lack of boundaries. This belief that you have to be available all the time, to pay at any price and bear any burden. You wind up just simply burning out. No boundaries, you are going to burn out. And not only are you going to burn out, from way too much work that you shouldn't be doing yourself, but you're also going to be living this life of regret, that all of these personal priorities that you had, your family, your friends, important causes, all get put permanently on the back burner. And at some point you wake up and you say, and where did all that time go? Why am I just this one-dimensional person? And of course, just because you love your work doesn't mean your work is going to love you back. So the oxygen mask principle here is vital. Apply the mask to yourself before you apply it to other people. Now, the oxygen mask principle doesn't mean be selfish. Like, nobody is saying put your mask on first and then sort of laugh at everybody who's struggling to get their mask on, or prevent other people from putting on masks so you can hog all the oxygen. It's not what it means. It means you're applying the mask to yourself first so that you can help other people. And it is a great way to set the example about how to manage your professional fulfillment and your personal fulfillment so you're in a healthy place on both. So let's draw this up. So this is preventing the dark side of servant leadership. And we can look at this as a triangle. And we're going to label the lines. So the first one is you have got to have clear standards. So people know what you expect of them. And if they know the expectations, then there's a much better chance that they're going to meet them. Actually, let me just pull this down here so it's all on one screen. All right. The second is accountability, where accountability means that you're upholding those standards. You're expecting people to meet those standards. You're expecting them to get better and better every day. And you empower them with training, with the appropriate support so that they can not only meet the standards, but continue getting better and better every day. And then third, of course, is healthy boundaries. You're never going to achieve work-life balance. It's not what it is, like a 50-50 sort of teeter-totter. It's not realistic. You're going to achieve work-life management, where you're making smart decisions about where you're surging at work and smart decisions about where you're surging on your personal fulfillment. And you do it in a way that you are not just physically present at places, but you are engaged in exactly what you're doing. When you put all of these three together, when you've got strong standards that are realistic and achievable and important, you have accountability that inspires people to contribute their best and constantly elevates performance in healthy ways. And you maintain boundaries about what you let in to your life and a appropriate professional and personal management. Then what you get is healthy leadership. And that's a fabulous way of setting a great example. So this is, of course, one of the fascinating conversations we have out there. And for each of these, what does red look like? Red being you're not doing it very well, or doing it excessively. And then what does green look like? What does green behavior look like when it comes to standards, accountability, and boundaries? And what a great way, when people know what right looks like, they're going to follow it, especially when they got their fingerprints on it. So question, how ruthlessly do you vote with your presence? Thanks for tuning in to the Leader's Edge podcast. If you found today's episode valuable, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review, because it helps more leaders like you find their edge. Do you want to take these lessons further? Well, you can visit my website, chriskolenda.com, for resources, support, and adventure offsites that build unbeatable positioning, help you create an unstoppable workforce, and give you the tools for unwavering inspiration. Until next time, stay decisive, stay inspired, and keep leading from the front.